let's get this show on the road, right? So, first little segment I've got is going to be about abortion because lots of stuff is happening with abortion in the country. So last week we talked about a federal court case in Texas, which is getting ready to ban one of the two abortion drugs that are used for chemical abortions in roughly 50% of the abortions in the country, right? And this is a drug called mifepristone, right? Hey, I pronounced it right that time. Mifepristone. All right, so I told you I'd learn how to pronounce it. Anyway, so this is along with another one called miprisol, I think, is part of a two-drug combination that is used to basically do a chemical-induced abortions, right? And there's been a big push all around the country in order to limit access to these drugs because once Roe v. Wade was overturned, all of the red states immediately put in all of their abortion bans and things like that. And I don't like that because that is too short. We need to make that longer somehow. Right? So they, spacing. Can I make the spacing? No. Can I turn spacing off? No. Can I make that size? See, that's not what I want. I don't want that. Get rid of shape dynamics. Get rid of transfer. That's a little bit longer. Smoothing. Still a little messed up. I'll be messing with this for a second. But anyway, so since abortion was overturned, Roe v. Wade was overturned there, right? Then that basically allowed all of the red states to start putting in their abortion bans and things, right? So you have stuff like something like 13 states just automatically banned it straight out, right? And then there's another 3 or 4 states that have gestational bans. So I think what it is, like Kentucky, for example, it's still legal, but it's banned after 20 weeks. And then Texas had a 6-week ban, and then I think they've just banned it completely in Texas now. So that was like, just a preliminary step there, right? And I think Georgia has a 6-week ban, so stuff like that, right? So in these states you can still get them, but the thing is, it's like a lot of the times, like 6 weeks is not enough time, for example. So a woman might not even know she's pregnant, and then by the time she figures it out, because a lot of the time your period may be irregular, stuff like that. And then by the time she figures out that she's pregnant, it's like already the ban has gone into effect and it's too late, which is 100% intentional, by the way. That's the whole idea behind these gestational bans, is making it harder and harder, right? Then we had attorney generals in 21 states threatening legal action against retailers for carrying over-the-counter abortion pills, things like Plan B, stuff like that, right? Saying that they were going to start taking legal action. And so some retailers like Walmart, for example, or Walgreens in particular, said, okay, we'll stop carrying these things, which has led to some blowback as well. So, for example, in California, I think Gavin Newsom came out and basically threatened Walgreens, saying, like, no, it is legal in this state, and you will carry this, or else we're going to take legal action to force you to carry it in California. So it's like in some states you got them saying that we're gonna ban this and prosecute you if you like carry these pills, and then in other states they're saying like, well, if you don't carry them, we're gonna prosecute you. So it's kind of culture war heating up a little bit on the abortion front. Now we have some more news out of Wyoming. Wyoming has been the first state to completely ban these pills. abortion pills. 100%. Right. And that this is a law that will come into effect on July 1st of this year. It would make it illegal to prescribe, dispense, distribute, sell, or use any drug for the purpose of procuring or performing an abortion. So you wouldn't, not just selling them, but if you say were an abortion activist and went over the border and just gave a bunch of these pills away for free to women who can't get them anymore, you could go to jail for that too. So they thought that part out. See, that was a thing that after Roe v. Wade, was outlawed. A lot of people on the left, a lot of abortion activists were saying, we can just do that. They started setting up websites in order to get distribution to women, stuff like that. I even remember some videos going up about people saying how you can make your own, your own sort of abortion medication, which is an extremely bad idea. I said it then and I'll say it again now. Do not make your own home-brewed abortion medication. Abortion pills. Do not do that. That is incredibly bad idea. You could mess up and put yourself in the hospital, if not worse. Right? Please do not do that. It is much, I mean, if you really, take the risk, leave the state or smuggle them in, whatever. But don't try to cook the shit up yourself in your home, your home kitchen, using stuff like medication that you got for veterinary use or something. Do not do that. Incredibly bad idea. But it does kind of show how desperate some women are, that they're willing to do that. That there are women going out there looking stuff up on the internet on how to make their own abortion, their own abortion medication, and taking that risk. It's that shows how desperate the situation is, right? So what would happen in Wyoming here, right? Anybody found guilty of violating this law would get a 6 months in prison or a $9,000 fine, right? Although the law does say that the woman getting the abortion would be exempt from this penalty. So pregnant patients will be exempt from charges and penalties. So at least it's got that cooked into it. So only the doctor goes to jail if this happens. The woman doesn't go to jail. She doesn't get fined. So at least someone in Wyoming realized that they had a basic, at least somebody there has a basic understanding of fucking humanity and understands that women who are doing this are desperate and need help. Right? And will not be throwing them in jail for it. But, the doctors that try to get them to help, they're the ones that are going to prison there. So it's still, incredibly bad. Right. So anyway, currently in Wyoming, abortion is still legal, but there is only one clinic in the entire state which provides abortions. This is a clinic in, it's called the Women's Health and Family Care Clinic in Jackson, Wyoming. Right. And it does not do surgical abortions. They do medical, chemically induced abortions. So that will effectively, once this law goes into effect, that will effectively remove abortion from access to abortion from Wyoming. So, how we were talking about soft bans last time, right? And overregulation. This is an example of that. So technically it's still legal there. The law is on the books that you can provide abortions, but there will be no abortion providers in the entire state. Right? Kind of a way for Republicans to weasel out of responsibility, consequences for this action, right? Because here's the thing, if they straight out outlawed it, that would make super huge headlines all around the country, right? and protesters would show up. But if it's still legal, they just get rid of this drug. It's sort of a backhanded way of getting around that, you know. And that's the same kind of approach that we saw in with this case in Texas, in this federal case, in order to outlaw, mifepristone around the country. They chose a really small town in the middle of nowhere. Apparently the town where the court case is being held is like 4 hours away from like the nearest other town. Like it's really out in the boonies. Texas is gigantic, by the way. If any of you guys have ever been through Texas, it takes like 3 days to like drive through Texas without stopping. Like it's this massive area, and most of it is just nothing. Most of it is like wilderness, like desert and right, scrub brush and shit. You know what I mean? So it's just this town. So they choose this town, which is really fucking far away from anything, and then they tried to like hide the court date so that people didn't know when it was going to happen. This has not stopped protesters from showing up at all, because people are tenacious, right? And but still, that's their plan. Their plan is to do this shit quietly without a lot of fanfare, so that you just wake up one day and suddenly all your rights are gone. That's the idea, right? So anyway, earlier versions of this bill in Wyoming named the specific drugs, right? So that's mifepristone, and then 2 brand name versions of it, as well as misoprostol. That's the second drug, right? Usually those 2 drugs are taken in combination. And but then they said, oh well, they'll just change the names of the drugs and still sell it. So now they took that out, so that it just says any drug, right? So that's kind of fucked up. The governor of Wyoming, I got a quote here from him, right? This is the Governor Mark Gordon of Wyoming, who is of course a Republican. His quote: "I have acted without bias and after extensive prayer to allow these bills to become law." Without bias and extensive prayer. So the extensive prayer part kind of sounds like bias to me, wouldn't you say? Right? Because who are you praying to exactly? What, the Surgeon General? Like if you didn't have bias, then why are you asking God what you should do? It seems like that's a lot of bias. It seems like it's a conservative Christian, evangelical, Christo-fascist kind of bias to me, right? Because I'm pretty sure God really likes it when you force people to live by your morality. I'm pretty sure that's something that once you go to heaven, pretty sure God's going to be high-fiving you and saying, hey, thank you so much for forcing people to live the way that you want them to live. I mean, and completely take away their freedom to choose stuff, choose how they want to live or die and how they want to plan their families. Pretty sure God's going to be very, very fucking happy about that. I mean, if you actually believed there was a God, which by the actions of these people, I can only conclude that they really don't. Right? But I don't know. I guess, at least me as a somewhat atheist, at least the atheists and the, and the other people, who tip their fedoras, right? At least we're not bullshitting people and trying to pretend that we have some answerable higher moral authority to submit to. Because in real life, it doesn't seem like conservative evangelical Christians actually do that. It seems like they just do whatever the hell they want and then justify it afterwards. Which is why they're perfectly content using the law in order to force people to obey their will. Right? So another bill has been introduced in Texas, right, to ban these abortion pills. Of course, we have that case that we talked about already in Texas to overturn the FDA's approval of mifepristone, right? But there's also another case, in case that one doesn't go through, there's also another case in order to ban abortion pills in Texas. Now, please keep in mind that Texas already has an abortion ban, right? So it's like, this is just another basically messaging bill that actually doesn't do anything. It's like you're throwing another ban down on top of your first ban, right? But anyway, this bill in Texas would close off any way that you could seek access to these abortion pills, which also would make it difficult for women to get information on them, right? Although I don't know how the hell a law is supposed to do that. Like, I don't know, is that going to mean that there's going to be like internet filtering or something? I mean, it's one thing to actually write that into a law. We're going to ban access to information on this or that. But, we have search engines that should be able to get around these things. So I'm not sure how they're going to enact that part. But just the fact that they're trying to write that into a law in the first place seems kind of shitty to me, right? It would also make it illegal to manufacture or distribute an abortion-inducing drug in any manner to or from any person or location in the state. So if you, like I said before, tried to bring them over from out of state, you would get arrested for this. So not even like taking it, just giving it to somebody. So it's basically like criminally outlawing these things. Imagine going to prison for smuggling abortion pills. It's like you're a drug dealer. Technically, you would be a drug dealer. And they would throw you in jail with, crack cocaine fiends and guys smuggling heroin and and fucking fentanyl and all this other shit. So you'd be like in a cell with dudes with like tattoos and they're part of MS-13 or whatever. And then they look at you and you're like, what are you in for, man? Smuggling fucking Plan B across the border. Like, seriously, that's how ridiculous this is all becoming. Another bill in Wyoming that has just become law, right? And apparently the governor didn't sign this, but there's a method in Wyoming where bills can become law without the governor signing it, which I don't know how that happened, but I don't know. Anyway, another law in Wyoming is called the Life as a Human Right Act. And that means because according to this law, basically, if you administer an abortion, then that is now considered a felony, right? Whereas before you would just be a misdemeanor and you would just get a fine or something. Now a doctor that gives you an abortion in Wyoming, that's a felony, and you can get 5 years in prison. Doctors would have their licenses revoked, and this is, basically completely outlaws it altogether. So that's it. Abortion gone. Starting in, because like we said, it was still technically legal, but once this law goes into effect, no more abortion. Now there are narrow exceptions in this law for rape and incest, or if the mother's life is in danger. But as we're already kind of seeing around the country, those provisions don't do very much. We're starting to see lots and lots of stories of women who are being denied. They might have what do they call it, an endemic pregnancy. Basically where the fetus is dead, right? And the longer it stays in the womb, the longer it could basically result in the mother, harm to her health. And we're starting to see in lots of red states that women with this problem are being denied abortions because the doctors that, they don't want to go to prison. So, so basically this is resulting in many women, losing their lives or losing further reproductive capability, right? So imagine like you want to have children, right? And first one didn't work out. This is and this is the thing. This is no fault of your own. Sometimes shit doesn't happen. Sometimes having children is very difficult, right? You have health reasons or whatever. It's not just this is stuff that can happen to anybody, right? And this one doesn't work out. Doctors don't give you an abortion, and then when they finally do, because you will die if they don't do it, then they end up basically rendering you sterile. We're seeing lots of cases of that happening all over the country, right? And it's these are all problems that we didn't have 2 years ago. 2 years ago, any state in this country, if a woman had her life in danger, right? Like, what do they call it? Is it called an endemic pregnancy? What is it called exactly? I'm gonna look that up because I don't want to be mispronouncing that. Like, and endemic pregnancy. What the hell is? What do they call it? It's like stillbirth, right? Is it like endemic? There's a word for it. I don't know. I can't. I'm not gonna worry about it now. But there's a word. Basically, it's like stillbirth. Basically, the child dies in the womb, and then, and then if you leave it in there, it's like it could start like rotting, like, and then it can cause necrosis, and then all kinds of shit can happen, right? And you want to basically remove it as soon as possible. And a lot of red states that procedure is being delayed, right, to the point where many women's lives can be in danger. And it's like we're already seeing that. So it's sort of like we're already seeing the consequences of this, like around the country in red states in places like Texas and whatnot, right? And Texas and frickin' Tennessee and shit like that. So even though this bill in Wyoming says, oh, we make exceptions for that, it's like, well, no. In real life, what really happens, like it's a de facto ban, even for those people, right? And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. We should be allowing, especially when it comes to your health, something that may potentially negatively impact your health. You should be able to go into any clinic anywhere in this country and get health care and not have to jump through fucking tons and tons of red tape for it. That's the first thing, right? Especially when it comes to something like this. I mean, even if you don't believe in abortion, right, personally, who are you to deny this to anybody else? It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, another thing in this bill in Texas, right? This bill in Texas that would get rid of the abortion pills, right? It doesn't just stop there. It would also make it illegal to, listen to this, create, edit, upload, publish, host, maintain, or register a domain name for an internet website, platform, or other interactive computer service that assists or facilitates a person's effort in obtaining an abortion-inducing drug. So if you just create a website, right, saying, hey, it's illegal in Texas, but you can go and, here's a number you can call, and these people will help you go to, Colorado and get one or something, right? If you just create that website inside of Texas, then you go to jail. I mean, just listen to that shit. And keep in mind, just to see how backwards all of this crap is, right? Texas is a state that, like, has the highest number of gun violence in the entire country. That's Texas. Because everybody in Texas has a fucking firearm, right? So, and there's something like thousands of people a year. We're going to look it up just to see. Let's see. Texas Number of firearm deaths, right? More than 4,000 gun-related deaths in Texas in 2020. All right, that's basically the highest number in the entire country, right? So just to kind of give you, here's what I'm looking at right now. This is the Texas Gun Sense facts. Let me turn on my window, right? This is what I'm looking at right now. Texas Fast Stats Guns and Gun Violence Facts, right? More than 4,000 gun-related deaths in Texas in 2020. 61% were suicides, right, in 2019. 2019, 73% of veteran suicides were by firearm. 2020, 183 women in Texas were killed by an intimate male partner. 67% of those were by firearm. Women in Texas are 24% more likely to be murdered with a gun than in other states. 2019, at least 32 children ages 0 to 17 died in unintentional shootings. So that's just, just in Texas, right? Just to kind of show you what's going on there, right? If they really cared about children, if they really cared about women, they would do something about that. But they don't care, right? They don't care about women. They don't care about children. And that's the thing that we really need to remember when it comes to all of this abortion shit, right? They don't actually give a fuck about people. They don't care about the little babies, right? You hear them say, we have to protect those fetuses, and God, it loves children. They don't, but they really don't give a fuck about those children at all. They don't care about those children or their welfare or anything else which may end up killing them. The number of death in childbirth has gone up over the last 2 years, like an embarrassing amount. There's less death by childbirth in Cuba than there is in the United States, right? Cuba, a tiny communist country with not a lot of resources, that's been under an embargo for 70 years at this point. When did the Cuban embargo start? In the 1960s. So what, 60 years? Right? 70 years now. Right? Is it 70 years? Wait a minute. 50 years, excuse me. But still, the Cuban embargo has been going for a very, very long time. So 50 years, right? Somehow they're able to, protect their children that are born there, to protect their women that are born there. Somehow they're able to do that, and we aren't, right? And instead of doing something to address these problems, things like, women and children being murdered by firearms, or, helping, preventing the death during pregnancy, stuff like that, right? Instead of actually doing something to address these real problems, we're regressing. We're taking away women's rights. We're taking away the rights of people to plan their families, right? We're making it harder for people to do these things. And inadvertently, as a result of that, more and more women are suffering, right? There's something wrong. Our country is regressing. It's going backwards. And that's what happens when Republicans get in charge. Shit regresses. Shit gets worse. Right. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, the governor there, his name is Tim Walz. He just signed a law guaranteeing free breakfast for every student in the state that goes to school. Every single student now in Minnesota gets free breakfast, regardless of income. Right. In California, Gavin Newsom just announced $1 billion in funding for homeless programs. Right. $1 billion in order to help get homeless people off the street, including they're going to build 1,200 tiny homes for people. So you see these little tiny homes. They're like little tiny cottages that are like 1 or 2 rooms, right? Now that doesn't sound like a lot, right? 1,200, and it really isn't. But if you think about it like this, what you do is you make those into halfway houses, right? So you create a tiny home village, right? And then the person that takes it, they kind of move in until they can get their own place. And then another person comes, and that's why you can help people get off the street. Because a lot of the times, people who are homeless, like if you're older, for example, you may be getting Social Security, but you won't be able to collect it because you don't have an address, you don't have an ID, right? Well, they're not gonna, or you don't have a bank account. So you may have like disability checks, you may have years and years of Social Security that you're owed. But you can't get an ID without an address. Where are they going to send it to? You have to fill these things out. So they put you in this sort of halfway house, this little tiny home. Use that as your address. You get all your IDs, stuff like that, and then suddenly you're able to take this money that you are owed, and that'll help them get off the street. Then they can afford to get their own place, right? That happens a lot with old people, a lot with old people. You would be surprised about how many homeless people are on Social Security and not getting it. How they're supposed to be on disability and they can't collect it, right? That kind of thing. That happens a lot, right? Another thing is like, you may have a guy, he's got a job, but he just can't afford first and last. So they move him in one of these little tiny houses, and then he can basically keep working at where he's at and save up for sometimes even a month is all it takes. 30 days. Save up the money, you get first and last in rent, and then he can go get his own place. Because being homeless is expensive, right? Especially if you're like trying to stay off the street, you're renting hotel rooms and shit. That's like extremely expensive. And then let alone are you sleeping in your car? What do you do if your car breaks down? What do you do if your car, you get a flat tire, you can't afford it? What do you do if you know, if you get towed? Shit like that. It's like, then you're fucking shit out of luck. So it's like, this can really help people. Or somebody, they're a family, right? And you would think like, because my wife mentioned this to me. It's like, oh, I thought they took people's kids away when they got too poor, when they were homeless. Well, you would think, right? But unfortunately, that's not always the case. There are, even though that is still a very unfortunate thing, at least you would think like, well, at least the kids go to a, social services, right? But there are a very large number of homeless families with children out there in California and in every state, where like the entire family will be homeless, and the kids won't be going to school, stuff like that, right? And so what do? You move them into one of these little halfway houses, these little things that allows the time for the parents to get jobs and save up and get their own place. And then there's a place where they can sleep, and then the kids can go to school and all that stuff. And maybe it takes 6 months or even a year, and then they can be on their own. And so even something like that, even something like 1,200 little tiny home things can make a big difference to a lot of people. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think we need more like 5,000 of them, right? In order to get this shit going. If you really want to make a dent in that homeless population. But still, $1 billion, going towards shelters, going towards, because that's not all that they do. They also will just directly put people in low-income housing, and then like pay for, they'll get them an apartment, and then they'll pay for like a year's rent or something. There's all kinds of programs out there, right? So this is what's going on in other states. States where Republicans are not like, dominant, where they're not dominant, where they're not like completely in charge of everything. They're actually making changes. Not all the news is out there is bad. So this is the difference. In blue states, they're getting kids lunch. They're helping people get off the streets. And in red states, they're throwing people in jail for, getting a medical procedure that was completely legal less than a year ago. That's, that's the state of our country, folks. That's why it matters who you vote for. That's why it matters who's in charge. And this is why, you know, we got to fight it at every single level. You got to fight it at every level, every election, every single elected official. You have to vote for all of them. You got to fight for all of it, right? Because if they're in charge of anything, Republicans fucking, you know, all they do is ruin shit and ruin people's lives. You know. And the other bad thing, you know, unfortunately, it'll never end. That's the other part of this too. It never ever ends. We will never hit a point where it's okay and you can relax. You have to be ever vigilant. Right? You can't let these people take power. Ever vigilant all the time, every election, every single person. Every single person that runs, you gotta be vigilant. You have to research who they are. You gotta see what they stand for, what they vote for, right? And support the people that you do like. Get them out there, you know. Compromise where you need to, right? And vote based on the bigger picture. You know, sometimes the guy you vote for, say for example Gavin Newsom, sometimes you don't like everything that they do. Gavin Newsom has a lot of pro-corporate shit going in his background, right? A lot of pro-corporate shit that I really, really do not like, you know. But he just pledged $1 billion to help, you know, not just pledged it, he just like announced it. It's happening. It's not just a pledge, you know. He just put $1 billion to get homeless people off the street. You know, that's a compromise I can live with. I mean, what's the alternative to that, right? Some fucking crafty ass Republican asshole who just like deregulates everything and runs away with all the money. You got to think about how like politics affects your actual daily life, and it's not, you know, it's great to have ideals and to like vote based on principles and shit like that, but then you got to actually like, you got to be practical when it comes to this shit. You got to think about, well, what's actually going to happen? What can this person actually do, right? And what's his real stance on stuff, and vote accordingly. Anyway, folks, never give up the fight. It's not too late also in these red states too. You know, they're outlawing all this shit. All of these, that's the thing about democracy. That's the thing about our system of government. All of this stuff can be reversed. We can reverse it everywhere in all of these states. But it's not going to happen without any effort. You got to get out there. You got to vote. The people in these states, they need to vote. You know, if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal, if you're a progressive, and you live in Texas or Florida or, you know, Tennessee or any of these, you know, Wyoming, any of these states where this shit is happening, you got to get politically active, right? Because it'll never change unless you change it. And fortunately, we still live during a time where that's possible. You know, it's not, we don't live in a complete 100% fascist hellhole just yet. Right. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.